and welcome to Wine 101 on the road. Today, we are sitting in a relatively new and yet old winery. I'm sitting here with Jordan Fiorentini of Epoch Estate Wines. I'm Scott Sullivan. I'll be your host today. And this is a really special treat. These are some of the noteworthy wines that are coming out of an area just west of Paso Robles, almost to the coast. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jordan.
Hi.
And say welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So thanks for having us.
Oh,
So we're sitting in here in the wine facility, but I'd like to step back and start with the story of Epoch, which actually goes beyond that.
Yeah, so let's see. We have lots of great stories, but the neatest part of them is they're all intertwined. We're sort of repaving history as it was about 100 years ago in Paso Robles and reviving it, I should say. We started with the purchase by Bill and Liz Armstrong, who are the owners of Epoch, in 2004 of a historic vineyard property in Paso Robles. We call it the Paderewski Vineyard. It wasn't called that back then, but it's the heart of the property once owned by a famous Polish composer and statesman named Ignacy Paderewski. He's sort of famous in Poland and famous in Paso Robles. We have a Paderewski festival every year for him. He actually traveled the United States on rail car, and he played, he was a concert performer more than he was a pianist. He was just an amazing, amazing pianist. And people would travel from all around before, this would be like in the early 1900s, before the days of television, and watch him perform. He developed really bad rheumatoid arthritis, and his doctor suggested that he come and soak in the curative waters of Paso Robles. So that's what he did. He came here, he stayed at the Paso Robles Inn, and he bathed in the sulfur springs, and he fell in love with Paso and decided to buy property. So he bought about 2,000 acres in West Paso Robles, planted orchards and vineyards, and was really into it. And so that's our first property, which is, again, it's about 2.5 miles west of Paso Robles. We're sitting now on York Mountain, which is about 10 miles west of Paso Robles, and is also the site of the first bonded winery in San Luis Obispo County. So back in the late 1800s, this was not this building, but further down the hill was a functioning winery. And then about 20 years later, Paderewski came and planted his vineyard, and they operated separately. But at some point, Paderewski had the York brothers make his wine. And then Prohibition happened, the land went fallow, and the winery was condemned during an earthquake. So the Armstrongs came back and purchased the heart of the property he owned and planted grapes on in 2004. We planted our main vineyard there. And then in 2010, we were able to purchase the York Mountain Winery. And we are redoing the old winery to be our new tasting room. And the grapes are once again making the trek from the Paderewski Vineyard to York Mountain to be made into wine.
Wow.
And I get to shepherd that.
That's fabulous. So this was back to the 1800s, right?
Yeah, so this facility where we're sitting didn't exist back then. It was a late 1990s winery, but the York Mountain Winery was late 1800s, and Paderewski came in the early 1900s. So
quite a history here.
Yes.
So let's talk about you a little bit. How did you get involved in this? How did you get started in wine at all?
I get that question a lot because I'm actually from Atlanta, Georgia, and
good wine country.
Yes, good wine country. Well, they're growing grapes everywhere now, but not in Georgia back then. And after I went to undergrad in New England, I wanted to look for a profession that combined art and science, because that is what I did, and I also studied Italian language. So my father was really into wine. I visited wine growing areas around the world, and really just wanted to try a harvest. So I moved to Napa Valley. That was the harvest of 1999. And I worked a harvest. And instead of doing what all of my peers were doing, which was working on Wall Street or in Boston or New York doing something else.
She went to Dartmouth.
I decided to go to UC Davis to get my graduate degree in viticulture and enology. And that was about a 2.5 year program, during which I worked in Napa again, and I studied in Italy, and worked at a winery. And then I had chosen a very narrow path, but it's a great path. So I'm super happy. My dad, in the meantime, had actually planted a vineyard in the North Georgia mountains. And so when I was in Italy, I had met my now husband. We wanted to move to the United States together. So we lived in Georgia for a little bit, helped build his winery and get that kind of winery and vineyard going. And then at some point we decided to move back to California, and I got a job in Sonoma County at Chalk Hill Estate, which first I was the associate winemaker, then I became the head winemaker. But then it looked like the winery was going to change ownership. So I was sort of like thinking, well, maybe I want to move on, I'm not sure. And I just looked into this job on a whim, really. I was not planning on moving from Sonoma to Paso Robles, but I met with the Armstrongs, the owners, and fell in love with the vision of the project back then, and really liked them. And I always say, you never know when you take a job or you interview, it's kind of like you're dating. You don't really know what you're getting into, but I definitely won the lottery that day for what it ended up being.
Well, your credential, actually, when she was in Italy, she worked for no small house over there. You worked for a pretty big company.
I worked for Antinori, which is a very well-renowned Italian winery, many generations. So, yeah, it's been a great journey.
So you came here on the ground floor.
I did. The vineyard was planted, and we had 2 vintages, 1 vintage in bottle and the 2 vintages in barrel, I would say. So first vintage was 07 here. I joined in 2010.
Very, very cool. Yeah, this is gorgeous. It's up in the mountains. What are you, about 1,500 feet, you said?
Yeah, I think that our highest peak, we're at about 1,500 elevation. We're off 46 West, which is the corridor that runs from Paso Robles to Cambria, Highway 1. On the Pacific Ocean, really close to Hearst Castle, and this property is smack dab, like a mixture of West Paso climate meets the coast. So it's a lot cooler than the rest of Paso Robles. It gets a lot more rainfall.
Yeah, it's very cool here, and it's the architecture. We've got windows that are all electronic. Everything opens according to the ambient temperatures, breezes, and so forth. This is very much a sustainable building, and I think that your growing practices, everything is about sustainability.
Exactly. We're not only sustainable, we're not certified yet, but we're looking into certification for biodynamics in our vineyards, which also gives you the organic certification. And we're very much we want to study everything, but be as hands-off as possible in the vineyard, well, in the winery mostly, and in the vineyard doing everything that's right for the land. So I very much believe that a winery has a terroir along with your real terroir. So having the wines be able to be brought up here in this more coastal climate and have them live and breathe this air in this open air room is really exciting to me. We've made 2 vintages here so far. We moved in 2014. So, hopefully you guys will be able to see that in the wines as well.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the Liz and Bill Armstrong. They're the owners. Tell us about their history, because this is a first-rate facility. I mean, they're doing this right. So what's their interest? Why are they involved?
So they're from Denver, Colorado, and they're both geologists, and they really Bill and Liz are in the oil and gas industry, but they're just their own small private company, and such a love for the land and history. And they wanted to look into getting into the wine industry in California, but they weren't quite sure where. They just didn't, they looked at Napa, but didn't really feel that it was them. Originally they're from Texas and Louisiana, so when they came to what we call the last cowboy town of California, and Paso Robles, I think they felt at home because of the community, and then just completely in love with the geology of the rocks here. I mean, it's something that there's, I'm sure people would argue with me, but it's one of the most geologically exciting areas, wine growing areas in the United States.
And that kind of ties in with the name. How did they get the name? What does the name mean, Epoch?
So Epoch, E-P-O-C-H, Epoch. So it actually means a period of significant geologic time. It was, when you're picking a winery brand name or a wine name for a blend, it's really hard to find one that's not taken. That happened to be available at the time, and it's become, you become your name almost, like, people define the name they are. And so at the beginning we were like, okay, this is our name, and now we're like, this is us, it's Epoch, so it's really become, and it makes so much sense in hindsight, Yeah.
No, this has become, I don't want to use the word cult, but this has become its own entity. People know Epoch, they know this region. Saxum and some other great producers are pulling grapes out of this area and these areas on the western side. But you guys are focusing more on a specific range of products, grapes and so forth. What are those? So
we grow all our own grapes. We have 2 vineyard properties that we're pulling grapes off of at the moment, and we make mostly Rhone-based blends. So that's Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre. You could argue Petite Syrah in the New World, and Viognier, Grenache Blanc, and Roussanne for whites. We grow a tiny amount of Tempranillo. That was more of an experiment because when you're first planting a vineyard, you really don't know what your golden ticket will be. And Zinfandel, as sort of in honor of Paderewski, he actually planted Zinfandel way back in the day. And we obviously know there's some really great old vine Zin coming out of Paso. So that was the reasoning behind that. So yeah, Rhone blends, Tempranillo, and Zinfandel.
Very cool. Very cool. So now we talked about Paderewski. There's another vineyard?
So yeah, Paderewski was the first, and then it was kind of not on the beaten trail back in 2004/2005. So we were not, completely sure. Well, I say we, the collective we. I wasn't here quite then, but what kind of grapes were going to be growing on that property. And so Bill had come across this other piece property kind of smack dab in the middle of the Templeton Gap, right off the 46 West. It's on Anderson Road, so it's near a few other wineries like Booker and Kaliza. And it was just a small 30-acre parcel, but actually it was a 35-acre parcel, but most of it was plantable, and it had a little bit different soil. It was completely shale versus more limestone and shale at Paderewski. So he thought, well, this one's a sure thing. I think it might blend really well with Paderewski or be its own thing. So planted that in 2008. So now they're kind of both come of age somewhat, and starting to get fruit we've been getting fruit off of both vineyards for quite a while.
Very cool. Well, the first thing that I noticed, several of our crew noticed as we walked into this, they've taken some of the old redwood from old barrels. They've taken and repurposed a lot of the materials to build this ultra-modern winery in kind of a tribute to the past. And it's very cool. But behind us, the reason we chose to sit here is this is pretty cool. And this is pretty extensive for Paso. To have this many concrete tanks. What can you tell me about those?
Yeah, so this is not by chance. This is a studied winemaking practice by us. We made our wine in a different facility for many vintages. We played around with concrete fermentation and concrete aging. So we decided that for the Rhone varieties and for sort of like the intensity of fruit and personality in the wines we were making, we really liked the characters that the concrete fermenters were helping to highlight in the wines. So these are made locally. We got to design them with a local tank manufacturer. And so you won't see anything like this except for here. They're conical, somewhat truncated tanks, and they hold about 4 tons each. The really cool thing, though, because we are open air here, we don't have active heating and cooling in this room. The walls of these tanks are really thick, and they actually have embedded in them heating and cooling coils, much like a heated concrete floor in a house. And so we can manage the temperature really well, but we don't have to really use the temperature control that much because they are so thick. And we pick the grapes really early in the morning so they remain cool and they gradually warm up as they ferment. So yeah, it's all 100% natural earth concrete. It doesn't have like any extra chemicals added to it. I get that question a lot.
Yeah.
So the floor, of course, has maybe some different things to make sure it doesn't crack, but like the actual concrete of the concrete tanks is just natural substances.
Now, when you get the tanks in, is there a treatment that you do to neutralize or to wash
Yes,
them
that's a good
first?
question. So concrete is high in pH, it's alkaline. So we don't want to shift the pH of the grapes or the wine too high during the fermentation. So we do a tartaric acid wash where we sort of spray on a tartaric acid, or we brush it on slurry, and we wait till the sort of bubbling reaction stops, rinse it off, and then fill the tank with the grapes for fermentation. We do that, and then we clean them off with water and a little bit warm water, not hot, after every harvest, and then we do the treatment again every year before we fill.
Of course, they have stainless and they have oak in all different regimens. What wines are you harvesting, or not harvesting, but what wines are you bringing out of and bottling now this time of year?
So our wines age from like 16, the red wines age from about 16 to 18 months in barrel and concrete downstairs in our barrel room. And so we're in the middle of the bottling season. So we are about to bottle 2 of our bigger blends next week, actually. So it would be about 17 months in barrel, 4 to 6 weeks held upstairs in tank, and then we bottle out of the tank.
And so you're involved from being in the fields with the grapes when they're young, and the harvesting, obviously, and then the winemaking.
Yeah, so when I took this job, I worked with when I was at Chalk Hill, there was a viticulturist who was in charge of the vineyards, and I never wanted to be completely like, every decision is just mine in a vacuum, but I wanted to have a big say in the vineyards, because a lot of times, it's a conversation, and we're chasing this ever sort of developing paradigm of what we want the wines to be. So I wanted to really be involved in the vineyards and obviously the winemaking, which is where most of my training came. And so I was able to have to be overseeing both of those aspects at Epoch, which was also something that was really exciting to me. So we work with a lot of consultants. We have a biodynamic consultant. We have other vineyard consultants. And it's just a matter of like getting all the information about what's going on and making the best decision for the vines and for the wine.
Very cool. So you spend year-round a lot of time up here.
Yes, I'm here most of the time, and then as the growing season gets kicked off, which is from bud break in April to harvest in the fall, I'm off and on traveling between the vineyards. But I'm up at the winery most of the time.
But then you also leave the property. You have to go do a little salesmanship.
A little bit,
what
yeah.
do you get involved in there?
As much as I want, which is great. I have 2 small children. Well, they're not that small anymore. 2 children, 2 daughters. So I go on the road basically as much as I want. Pretty much hit the California market a little bit more. But I've been in Arizona this year, which is exciting. Yeah. This is my year for Arizona.
Very, very cool. So now, the lineup of wines that you have now, just walk me through. Like, so you have a...
So I'll sort of start like how I would taste them.
Okay.
We actually make a rosé and a white.
Fabulous.
So the rosé is more for like, this is this summer, this year, drink it, consume it. Really, really taking inspiration from the south of France, even up to the bottling. Some really sexy packaging we've got going this year. Our white is a Grenache Blanc based white Rhone blend. So Grenache Blanc, then usually about 50+%. Viognier, and then a little bit of Roussanne. And that wine, I like to see it, it tastes great now. We've bottled the 15 in March, and we're just getting ready to sell it. Same with the rosé. Just started selling the rosé. So I like to have a little bit more age on that. So that's why I pour the rosé first. It's more, I don't want to say simple, but it's more like drink me now, versus the white's a little bit heavier, but not heavy, because we want it to be crisp and enjoyable for the summer. And then we make our Zinfandel. We have 2 Grenache-based blends. One's called Veracity, which is basically a Grenache-based Grenache Syrah Mourvedre blend, a GSM, like everyone talks about in Paso. And then we have 100% Grenache called Sensibility. So those are kind of the lighter on the lighter side of the reds. We have our estate blend, which is kind of a snapshot of our growing practices and our varieties in that vintage. And that's a Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Tempranillo blend mostly. So that's kind of like our little mix mash blend. It's our sort of everyday Epoch. We like to say it's a little bit lower in price, but all the quality is the same. So the price is just, you know, because there's a little bit, we want it to be in restaurants and stuff like that throughout the country. Then we have Ingenuity, which is Syrah based again, Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Petite Syrah. So I have Authenticity, which is the Syrah Mourvedre. And then we have 100% Syrah, which is our Block B, which is kind of like the creme de la creme. Some of these wines are only available in distribution. So like they seem like a lot, but when you look in the market, there's only a few maybe available in distribution, depending on the state. And then we make a Tempranillo, which is kind of like,
darn good Tempranillo.
Yeah, it's a different tannin structure, so I just shove it to the end in terms of tastings because it's very different than everything else.
So what's your production?
We're at about 6,500 cases, but that floats. It's been floating down from that in these last couple of years of really dry, warm weather because
it's
the vines.
all estate fruit.
All estate fruit. So it's like a kind of juggling up and down, but more to the down. So we're just kind of playing it organically. We have more property we can plant if we want. We get to sell fruit to some very special winemakers in Napa and this area. And that's more of like for an exchange, kind of like of ideas and talking points.
Good.
So that's why we're doing it, not for anything else. But
so now she hasn't said anything. She's understating this, but these wines here are probably among the highest scoring wines in California across the board. I mean, you get great scores. So
we've been very fortunate.
So tell us about some of your accolades.
Well, let's see. That's funny. That's a hard question for a winemaker. We've done pretty well from the get-go, and I think it's the sort of attention to detail and the ability to have the resources to do the right things in the vineyard and the winery. And probably our biggest accolade came the first year that I had made wine, which was our 2010 was 100%. I was in the vineyards all year and then in the winery. And our estate blend, again, is our lower priced wine, was kind of like in the market, people like the distributors, they were like, oh, give me your more expensive wines. This is what has been scored and what we know. The estate blend was like a new wine for us. And that wine got number 25 of the top 100 wines of the year in Spectator that year. And that is more of like a restaurant distribution list, I would say, more than, I mean, the public hears about it too.
Sure.
And so we were kind of like these new kids that had gotten this incredible accolade, so it really put us on the map.
Very cool. Yeah, when you get a chance, it's worth the drive. It's an extra 10 or 15 minutes west of Vineyard Drive as you come out 46. But just, it's gorgeous up here. The wines are even better than the scenery. People are super friendly. And I always like to ask on this show if you could take one bottle of your wine, and it can change daily, but just today,
it does,
what would be a perfect pairing for
what do I feel like having right now?
Wine, and what would be a great wine and food pairing?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay, so it's kind of warm too. So I would say like our rosé would go great with oysters, but I also say I like drinking rosé with potato chips, so that would work. Or I would do our white with like a fatty fish, white fish.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the time.
You.
I mean,
Thanks
it's wonderful talking to you.
Oh, it's great to have you guys here.
Jordan Fiorentini. Epoch Estate Wines is open. How long?
We're open 7 days a week. We have always put sort of limits on our wines because we want people to be able to come here every day like they came to the York Mountain Winery. It was always open to the public. So we're sort of straddling this high-end wine versus wanting to be accessible to the public. So that's our goal.
Very cool. And I have another question. It's regarding the ponies. I've been coming here every year since they opened, and they acquired some horses.
Yeah, some Percheron horses. So they're a little bit bigger than ponies.
Yeah. So tell me about those.
So we got those, the York Mountain Winery and the York family back in the late 1800s had work horses, draft horses here, and they planted orchards. And so there's such a landscape element, and it's such a wonderful environment to have horses. So we've sort of it's like doing the architecture, like reviving that history as well. They might do some work in the vineyard one day, we're not sure, but at this time we just ride them for fun. We've pulled carts before, and our goal is to have them in a local parade, and just kind of add to the community that way.
Very cool. It's a great site, and you guys should definitely make a choice to come up here. If you want to see this episode or any other episodes, you can watch us and find us on the web, streaming live at www.prescottmediacenter.com. .org, and that'll stream on the credits after this, so you can get the correct spelling. But again, we really thank you for coming, and if you're in the Paso area, come up to York Mountain, and most likely, and luckily, and hopefully, we'll see you on the road.
Thank you.